If you are like one of those people who really go to sleep and you sleep and you wake up and you're not refreshed and you get an amount of sleep that is decent, let's say between 6 and 8 hours, then I definitely suggest that you go and get a sleep study done to see what's going on with your breathing, what's going on with your brain frequency, with your heart frequency, and then see what the verdict is and then go from there.
Welcome to the Optimum Human Podcast, the show that interviews the world's top experts in fitness, nutrition, mindset, and beyond. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Optimum Human Podcast. My name is Brian McKay, he's Claude Petroulis, and we are your hosts of the Optimum Human Podcast. Today we've got another awesome guest, Miss Christine Hansen. Christine, how are you this morning?
Hi.
Or this afternoon, or whatever the heck time it is where you
The
are.
internet is timeless, Brian.
It is.
I'm great. I was great this morning. I was so great this afternoon. I hope I'll still be great this evening. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, as they say, we get to choose that, so.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And Claude, sir, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm not on fire, which I'm pretty grateful for. So, yeah, because I think being on fire probably doesn't feel good. So,
Well, it depends if it's literal or metaphorical, I suppose.
I think literally I don't want that as part of my life. But
Either.
yeah, you just got to appreciate the small things, like you're not on fire at the moment. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I hope you're doing well, Brian.
Doing pretty well this morning, actually. Thank you.
Small flames on your arms or anything?
No, other than that tattoo that I got in a drunken stupor years ago. But
Oh,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
That in another podcast.
I don't actually know.
That's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, well, I've been known to
shame you a
disappoint.
bit. Poor Christine has to sit here and listen to this.
Right, this ridiculous banter.
Quite entertaining. I'm like, okay.
Yes, edutainment, we like to consider ourselves, whether we are or not. I don't know, but
Yeah.
Anyways, Christine, so enough from us clowns. For those of our listeners who don't know who you are and what you do, can you enlighten us on who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I do have my standard line, or I can be a little bit more diverse because there's many things that I do. Let's maybe start with what I do professionally. Both. And then, just very quickly. So I'm an international holistic sleep strategist and coach. So I mainly focus on sleep as my specialty, but I really do so holistically by looking at the whole body and mindset of people. And then I'm a wholehearted entrepreneur, of course, because I have my own business. And I'm also a mom of a 3-year-old. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I do and who I am.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
And how did you get to become an international sleep coach? It's definitely an unusual career path, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't my calling from the beginning. So I was working for the government for 9 years here in Luxembourg in Europe, which is where I'm from. And I worked as an English teacher and had a very, regular, stable career, good income. Everything was just, trickling along perfectly well. But I wasn't really happy, let's put it that way. But at the same time, I had these typical kind of remorse feelings. You have a house, you have your paycheck, you have everything you need, a great family and stuff. Why would you be unhappy? Isn't that ungrateful? And so forth. And then I had my daughter, and when I got to go back to work after my maternity leave, it was really weird because basically everything was great. Like I had great classes, great schedule, and I was still not really, fulfilled. And every day I just had to think about my paycheck in order to get up and go to work. And I just felt I'm too young for this, And then in December 2013, my cousin was very young. He was 23, and he was really a joyful person and very athletic and just, the sunshine in a room. And he had a heart attack and he just died on the spot. And it was a huge shock for our whole family. And for me, it was, the wake up call, the kind of pivoting moment where I thought, okay, here was this young person who had so much potential and who would have made a difference to this world. And here I am, I was 32, 31 at the time, and I'm, not doing what I really want to do. And it really was this, you have one life kind of moment. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I got really freaked out about sleep because I love sleep and I don't function without sleep. And, well, during student days, I probably did. Yes, I did. But just with the help of a lot of drinks and stuff. But other than that, I need my sleep. So when I was pregnant, I really prepared because my sister had 3 kids, 2, everything was great sleep-wise. And then the youngest came along and she didn't sleep at all. And my sister was just like, I'm not saying wasting away, but she's a very tiny person and she became so pale, so exhausted, and had to take days off work because she just needed to sleep. And I just saw that and I was like, okay, this is not going to happen. Like, I will really do whatever I can in order to get prepared. So that's when I got interested into sleep. And that's why I started then when I decided to shift my purpose to become a pediatric sleep consultant, because that's basically the only thing that I knew, even though in Europe it's very rare. I was the first one to do that in my country. So it took a lot of education for people to actually know what it is. And it was just because I had signed up to a newsletter of the Sleep Sense program and they were just looking for candidates to certify that year. And so for me, just everything fell into place. I was like, this is something that I love. Like, I want to help people with this. And that's when I started my first business called Sleep Like a Baby. And then after a while, I had a lot of adults coming to me and I shifted to Sleep Like a Boss. And so now I'm really only working with adults, and I trained with a holistic science of sleep method, which is really looking at sleep hygiene and a little bit into sleep science too. And I also added functional diagnostic nutrition, which really helps me to go more into the science, into biochemistry, which allows me to interpret lab testing and which makes me more comfortable when working with people because I can really take it to a complete different level. And so all of that together, including a lot of mindset work that I did on myself really during my journey to become an entrepreneur, I really took all of that as well. And that helps me with the work of my clients as well, because I think that's kind of the missing spot. A lot of people, when it comes to sleep, are looking at all the exterior factors, but you need to work on what's going on inside just as much. And so connecting with my people and being able to help them through any stressors is really what I thrive on doing. And so that's how my journey led me here, basically.
And you're on the phone with me and Claude. It's
exactly.
been an interesting journey, I'm sure.
It is. Everything is there for a reason. So, but I got to know you because I don't even remember, but I think I don't even remember where we met. I think it was somewhere on Facebook.
Yeah, I believe
But
it
I
was.
really liked your profile because you're a Czech practitioner, and that is really something that I got to know, and that is completely in alignment with what I do. So it's really, all the people, including yourself, and now Claude, getting to know all of these people is just, it's a beautiful thing. It helps to see how many people really care about integrative health all over the place. And I really think it's a movement that's really necessary. And the more lovable people you have doing that, the better,
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So let's jump right into some practical stuff. I mean, when you work with a new client, what is kind of the top couple or 3 things that you really focus your attention on them getting, for lack of a better term, right in their life?
Yeah, so there's so much. Like, first, we really look at how we're going to work together, whether we're going to include lab testing or not, because that's going to obviously change quite a bit of the protocol that I'm going to do. But in general, I really like the dress protocol from FDN, so Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. And the dress protocol is basically about diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. And you can use that for everything. And so I basically design my protocols like that, but with an emphasis on sleep. However, I really do it piece by piece, because if I were to implement everything immediately, it would just be too much. So
yeah, talk about stress or need for stress reduction.
It would be like, forget it. It would be too much, So the first thing I do is really listen. And I think that's sometimes really underrated, but it's really, I listen to my clients a lot during the first session we're meeting, and that's when I already notice so many things where we can do subtle changes, whether it is nutrition wise, whether it is just helping them to adjust their lifestyle a little bit, whether it is in their personal life, in their relationships, or at their workplace. Like, for an example, when I'm working with someone who is not used to delegating a lot, but they have an assistant, one part would be, what can you delegate out? How can you restructure that? Then the next step would be, okay, in that department, your relationship wise, can you split up the cooking, for example? Then one part would be, okay, let's look at your nutrition and change 2 things for next week, before saying, okay, you're going to go on a full-on elimination diet, which is just going to put you into shock. I tend to work a little bit in smaller steps. And then then obviously we will implement sleep hygiene. So starting to add little tweaks like, don't take your phone into your bedroom. What is a sleep routine? Take a break during the day. Little stress diffusion techniques like journaling or gratitude journals, or freaking out on purpose, which is a technique I like to use.
I'm going to let you finish, but I definitely want to jump into that here in a minute.
To that one, I will explain it to you. Yeah, so things like that. And then obviously when we do lab test results, we're also going to look at the test results and see what kind of clues they give us, and then help the body as a whole to coach up that reserve so that the lab tests become more in range and just the way I would like them to see. So even if I see at a lab test, okay, there's one thing standing out, I'm not just going to work with one thing, but I'm really going to see what could be connected to, and then really look at all the different areas that we could improve to help, that one thing in a way, instead of saying, okay, you have a headache, so we're just giving you aspirin. I would really look at everything that could contribute to that headache, and then try to coach all of that up so that the headache would disappear in a way, so without diagnosing, it's really in a holistic way. But the freak out method is one of my favorite tools, actually, because I find a lot of my clients have a lot of stress around certain points, and a lot of the time it doesn't serve us to worry about things that, first of all, we couldn't change, and secondly, that will never come true. So let me give you an example. At the moment, I'm working with a client who is a very successful lawyer, and she is the main breadwinner. So her husband is also working, but it's just not quite the same income, and they've just built a huge, beautiful house. But of course, for her, it is a lot of pressure. And let's say if she doesn't have as much work, which would be great to relax, it stresses her out, because, she's like, what if I'm not going to have that much work for a longer time? And it's not that there's not even that much work. It would just mean that 1 week would be, just schedule wise a little bit quieter. And that is when I would tell her, okay, what would happen? Go to the worst case scenario. what would happen? You wouldn't have any clients coming in ever again. Your husband would leave you. You would lose the house. You would have to move to the suburbs where you don't want to live. That would be even worse. You would become an alcoholic. You would start living in a box under the bridge, and then a homeless guy would actually steal your box, and there you go, you know. So
Wow,
really
that is quite an imagination.
It's really going to the worst possible case scenario, because it will bring you perspective. You know, it will really help you to, at the end, you're going to laugh because it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. And you're actually going to see that what you've been doing has been, you know, amping you up stress-wise, but it's not, there's no real cause to actually think that far or to worry that much about it, because it's never going to happen. And it's very therapeutic to go that far. I always tell them to do it in writing, and to go at least 10 to 15 steps further than the first idea of worst case scenario that they had, like to really take it to a ridiculous level. And it's just really funny. Like at the end, they're just like, the last sentence of client showed me her journal, and it was just like, everything is ridiculous and everything is just screwed and I will never be able to get anything done. And then she had to just laugh because she just realized it's not true. And so sometimes these moments really help us to diffuse a tension that we had inside of us that was kind of ruining our health, really, not just our mind space, but also our physical health. And it's just, you know, that way, that's just one of the techniques that I like to use, depending on the person. Obviously, I have someone who had a real tragedy in their life. I'm not going to do that, but really depending on who I'm working with, it's a brilliant tool to use.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, certainly I've, heard of, just thinking or journaling worst case scenario, but I don't know that I've ever heard of it done to that extreme. So I love that idea, because it is just, it's so ridiculous. The majority of the fears that we have never, come to fruition. So
exactly. We're really giving oxygen to a tiny flame that would never have any chance of actually becoming a fire, so it's really about realizing that and just saying, no, I'm going to use that energy for something that I can actually change. So what about the situation is changeable? What about the situation? What can I do in order to prevent that? What can I do to remind myself of moving forward, and that's where coaching comes in a lot of the time, because sometimes it's difficult. We are, we love our old patterns. Our brain is trained to use the same pattern over and over again. Writing about it definitely helps, but I think one of the most efficient tools is still to talk to someone, have a sounding board, and just, being helped that way to move forward. And that's a huge step in working, in me working with someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just bringing awareness to our constant repetitive, likely negative thoughts, it can kind of shift things in and of itself without even necessarily replacing them with a thought or belief that's going to serve us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Christine, I'm actually interested in sleep apnea. Have you had clients that have had this situation? And I understand there's different types of sleep apnea. So are you familiar with all of that stuff?
Yeah, so sleep apnea it can be a tricky thing. Like, I really call that is like a sleep illness that is usually you have to look at with a sleep specialist in hospital, who can really analyze your brain frequencies. But there are different ways that sleep apnea works. So in general, the way that we talk about it is that you stop breathing and your brain basically has to jumpstart all the time. So it has to wake you up in order to have you breathe again. And there are different reasons for that. So sometimes it can be because a client is just physically, their tonsils can be in the way. So when they lie down, they kind of block their airway. Often people with short, wide necks tend to have sleep apneas. Often people who have a little bit too much weight or a lot of weight They also tend to be very prone to sleep apnea. So there we would look at nutrition, of course. And then there are other instances, though, where you won't hear it. Often it's connected to snoring, but sometimes you don't hear it and it's so quiet. So you can just see it in a sleep study, and it's really a neurological thing. And that's when you have to go and really use a CPAP machine in order to get enough oxygen. And, that's something that you would have to check out with your local healthcare provider who can do that. But you have to use that. A lot of people who even have access to those machines don't use them because they think it's uncomfortable and it looks a little bit weird. It's like an oxygen mask on your face. But you get used to it very quickly. And so it really depends. But sleep apnea, sometimes, I can never promise that I will heal it, which I would never do anyway. But I do look at what is happening. What does your physique look like? Can we change anything there? What is your sleeping position? Very often people who sleep on their backs, it's something that happens then. So there are little things, tweaks and things that we can do there. But if you have like a medical sleep apnea, then you have to go to a sleep specialist and see that they can help you with something like a CPAP machine, for example.
Yeah, I find it fascinating because there's a condition I hadn't heard of before, and I just thought it was like a blockage, but it's there's something called central sleep apnea, where apparently your brain doesn't give the signal to breathe. So you need a special CPAP machine that kind of measures I don't know if it measures your brain waves or what's going on, and then it infuses air in when it's needed.
Exactly. Yeah, so those are things that you would really have to see in a sleep lab. But for example, if you're someone, a lot of the time people don't know that they have it. So they wake up and they slept all night long, or let's say they went to bed, they closed their eyes and they woke up, but they are extremely tired, And so with some people who have like the respiratory sleep apnea, very often when they have a partner, the partner will tell them, you stop breathing or you snored, But if with those people, you don't even notice because it's really teeny tiny. They're like tiny seconds. But what it does is that it interrupts your sleep cycles all of the time. So you never get all of your sleep phases in. And those sleep phases are crucial in order to repair, in order to, function well cognitively, and in order to feel well rested the next morning. And the brain will take what it needs. So, theoretically, you could say, well, they never sleep, so how come that they are not dead in a way, if they don't get the sleep that they need? But our brain really knows, okay, I will get as much as I need as soon as I can get a second of sleep, which is also why nobody has ever really died of sleep deprivation. Like they've done experiments with people where they kept them awake over days, and even though that the people had their eyes open, they did realize that the brain just went in and took nanoseconds of sleep in order to get the most important repairs done. However, of course, if you do that, your immune system is going to weaken, and so people die much quicker, which is when we go into the morbid kind of sleep science way. But it's a part of sleep science is that it is used as a torture method. And a lot of the time people who would, or let's say soldiers who had been kidnapped or taken by enemies, the witnesses that would survive and would talk about this would tell people that it's because they became very cold, and they started to cough or have an infection, and it's just because your body is starting to get more and more weak. But physically, just not getting enough sleep is not your cause of death. And that's sometimes something that I need to say, because I have a lot of people who are very scared of sleep, who have witnessed someone falling asleep and never waking up again, which is a beautiful idea in a way, but it can be very, very distressing. And so it can really be a cause for stress of people not wanting, or subconsciously not wanting to fall asleep. And so when I walk them through the science that way, it really reassures them as well. So there's so many things.
Oh, for sure. And I think that you kind of touched upon a subject. It won't kill you, but it might extend your quantity of life if you have appropriate sleep, and also
for
it'll definitely
sure.
increase the quality, right? So
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, talking about sleep deprivation being torture, children, particularly newborns. I know that was kind of your former thing. Do you have any, real practical tips for new parents with infants that are not sleeping and therefore you aren't
Yeah.
sleeping?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can be said to children and sleep. So it's a huge topic, but I think a couple of things that people need to know is what is happening and explaining why things are happening. So I talked about sleep cycles, right? And so one sleep cycle is, usually light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, and then we wake up and we go into the next cycle. So with an adult, it's 90 minutes in average. With a newborn, it's 45. So you have a lot of parents who can tell you, okay, my baby just fell asleep, and I know that in 3/4 of an hour, like it's going to be like clockwork, he's going to wake up or she's going to wake up. And often babies have, or they can, you have babies who are just really great at connecting those sleep cycles. Like obviously they need some food when they are little, but very quickly, some babies are able to connect the sleep cycles and then they just wake up when they're really hungry. But other babies have issues doing that. So when they wake up after their 45 minutes, they can't really get into the next sleep cycle, but they're tired. And so, of course, what do? They cry because they need help. And then what tends to happen is, or what should happen, of course, with a newborn is that a parent or caregiver comes in and reassures baby and helps them to fall asleep, whether it's with food or with taking them into their arms and so forth. And that's how sometimes some babies can get really used to needing assistance and they just don't know how to sleep on their own. Now, when you have a newborn, it really depends on your baby, but my daughter was able to sleep through the night at 8 weeks,
God, I'm
and
so jealous.
But what we did was I really, really took care that she got enough sleep. Like after 45 minutes max, I would put her down for a nap, during the day. So she would never get more stimulation than 45 minutes, which is not that much, It's basically one feed, changing nappies, cuddling a tiny bit, and then off she'd go again. And even if she wasn't asleep, I would go up and have her in a quiet room. And that way she would never get too tired and she would never get too overstimulated, which is a huge problem with babies. We tend to have the idea that we need to entertain them, but just the idea, they've been in a womb for 9 months. They don't know anything. They don't even know what air feels like. They don't know light. They don't know smells. They don't know touch. And so a lot of babies tend to be overwhelmed, which can be very stressful. So my tip number one is really to really watch not to overstimulate your baby and to give them enough time to nap during the day. So I really advocate 45 minutes awake time and then go somewhere quiet and have them sleep. And then the next thing is that a baby's brain changes at the 12-week mark. So let's say as of the due date, 12-week mark. So why am I saying this? It's because you hear a lot about colicky babies, but there has not been any studies to really show it has anything to do with food or anything to do with their physical change. But it has been shown that at the 12-week mark, their brain is starting to shift. And at that moment, the sleep cycles are easier to differentiate. So what happens is that sometimes babies get stuck between their deep sleep phase and their light sleep phase. And what happens is that on the one hand, the brain is giving a trigger to continue sleeping, and on the other hand, the brain is trying to get into light sleep and to wake up, and they kind of get stuck in limbo land, and what they do is they cry, but they're not awake. So a lot of the time, maybe it's really hard to know whether a baby is sometimes awake or not because they cry and they're screaming, and it's very difficult to tell, especially if you've seen a colicky baby. It can be, there's sometimes we think they're awake, but actually they're fast asleep. So the only thing that changes at 12 weeks is actually that brain shift. And so a lot of the time, that's when babies start to sleep better. And so I'm really saying, okay, if you are a parent with a baby like that, there is not much you can do, unfortunately, until 12 weeks. And you should really not try to do any sleep training or anything like that anyway until 12 weeks, or I usually wait 5 months until I do any sleep training anyway. But what I do is really implement routines, give them a lot of breaks, make sure that you keep the room dark whenever they're supposed to sleep. Sunshine is stimulating our body to be awake. So there's lots of different things that you can do that way. But I think those are a lot of things that reassured the parents that I worked with, and really helped them to understand, okay, there's nothing like wrong with me and me tending to my baby, or I didn't spoil my baby. Like, you can't spoil a newborn up to 12 weeks. There's no way you can spoil them when they're crying. There's a reason, So that's always a big reassurance. And then afterwards, it tends to, as of 5 months, it tends to become a behavioral issue rather than a physical one. So up to 5 months, you can do a lot with environment, with routine. And then as of 5 months, it tends to be, when I talk that they can't connect the sleep cycles, that tends to be the major issue. But the good thing is that in 2 to 3 days, when you show your baby that they can actually fall asleep on their own, you're done. It's actually a pretty quick process. And then afterwards, we'd fine tune naps and stuff like that. But it is stressful because especially it's never a good time. Sometimes you have first time parents who are very stressed because they never had a baby. And other times you have parents who had 3 or 4 children and they don't want their little ones to wake up because of the newborn, or because they have to go back to work. And so it's never a great time to have a not sleeping baby, to be honest.
No, it's not.
But it's very rare. It's never the parents' fault. You never do it willingly, let's put it that way. But it just takes education and a plan and someone to talk to daily. Like when I used to work with my clients, I really used to talk to them daily in order to reassure them or adjust little things and see how we could make things even better. But yeah, it's just a lot of the time it's the hand holding that is key to this thing. And it seems to be a taboo issue a lot of the time. But seriously, not getting enough sleep is not doing yourself a favor. It's not doing your child a favor. And that's really, their brain is growing so quickly. They do 7,000 synapses, like new brain connection every minute. So their brain is on overdrive, really, and they need their rest, So don't ever have a bad conscience when you think about hiring a sleep consultant, or don't let anyone talk you into being a horrible person for wanting to do sleep training with your child. It's your business, it's your family. So that's really a big one that I really want to get out there too. And also as an adult, a lot of adults don't talk about not sleeping, because they think it's either normal or they think it's not something that anyone's supposed to know. And so it can be a very isolating place.
Yeah, I mean, so what's coming to mind for me is that the majority of people and topics that we talk about in this podcast, none of this stuff is taught in schools.
Oh.
And so, we just assume that this stuff is supposed to happen naturally, and maybe that's true and maybe it's not, but unfortunately, due to the way that we live our lives in the 21st century, we've kind of lost the naturalness. Yeah, I'm making up words again, for this stuff to happen. So definitely being able to work with someone who specializes in these, seemingly basic human functions, is definitely important.
Exactly. And I just had an article written about me in a national newspaper, and the headline was "Making Money with Sleep," which was like, it's just like, okay, but it's just unusual, but it's true, first of all. And I was asked that a few times. It's like you took one of the oldest and most natural things and you turned it into a business. And it's like, well, it's because we live in a world that is not the way that it is anymore. You can't sleep whenever you want to. You have to show up. You have so many commitments. You have work commitments. You have family commitments. So in other days, it would be possible, to have a different schedule, to design the schedule the way you want to. If you're an entrepreneur, then a lot of the times you can do that. But as soon as you have family, that goes out of the window because your kids need to go to school, So it's like, I'm dreading that. My daughter's starting preschool next year. And I'm just like, no, I'm a slave of the alarm clock again, which was one of the greatest things to leave behind when I started to become an entrepreneur. But it's, those are serious problems because we all have different circadian rhythms, biological clocks, and we have so much stress, not just emotionally, but also hidden stresses like toxins or gut dysfunctions, or our different hormone levels are completely out of whack, so many things. And those are situations that we were never faced with before. Previously you could just say, I have this problem. Okay, you're going to get a patch for that and we're good to go. But in the meantime, so many things are piling up that our body can't deal with it anymore. And so sleep, not being able to sleep, or being, on the other hand, chronically fatigued is not normal. It's one symptom of a lot of things that have gone wrong. And so it's really about cleaning all of that up and basically retraining our body, or giving them the respect and the resources it needs after years and years of beating it up. Really, it's a tough commitment sometimes to make, but once you actually get to know your body that way and to actually understand how you can feel, that's when you will never go back. And it's, people always tell me, I'm fine, I feel fine, and I'm just telling them, you probably have no idea what your body is actually capable of and what really feeling good is actually feeling like. And I had an interesting conversation about that with John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, because he was in the army where they were trained to be sleep deprived and to function on very little sleep. And he said when he came back and he was able to catch up on all of that sleep, he realized that he had completely forgotten what it actually feels like not to be tired. And it is a thing you can get used to, but it is really, really unhealthy. And it creates lots of problems, like biologically and also mentally. It's sleep is always going to come and have its revenge, like, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know how to phrase this question, but how well can someone, or at what length of time can someone, quote, catch up on sleep?
So you can't really catch up on sleep in terms of, well, okay, let me explain.
Partying for 3 days in a row and then sleep for 3 days in a row.
So let's see. When
sleep deficit problem, right?
Exactly. So let's put it that way. You can take the backpack metaphor and say, every day when you wake up and you had a good night's sleep, your backpack is empty. And as you go through the day, you put one brick into that backpack and then a second one. And so at the end of the day, your backpack is full of bricks. And then you go to sleep, and in your sleep, you get rid of the bricks again, so that in the morning you wake up again with an empty backpack. Now, what sleep debt does is that you're going to wake up with 1 or 2 bricks in your backpack already. And on top of those, you're still going to pile up all the bricks that are going to come throughout the day. So that's a little bit what sleep debt is. Now, what happens is that when you have sleep debt, your hormones become dysregulated, which means that your cell rejuvenation is corrupted, your cognitive function is corrupted, your detoxification is corrupted, your physical healing, let's say little fibers, muscles, all kinds of little fishes in your brain, all of these things are compromised. However, if you do catch up on sleep just over the weekend, that state will renormalize. So let's say your hormones were dysregulated during sleep dysfunction. You catch up on sleep, they will be regulated again. However, the damage that has occurred during the time when they were dysregulated is still there, right? So catching up with sleep over the weekend, yes, it's going to help your body to get back into balance again, but the damage that has been done is done. And very often when you damage one thing, it has a consequence to something else, which has a consequence on something else, and you cascade into all kinds of different things. On top of that, when you regularly, for example, have a sleep deficit during the week and then catch up during the weekend, what you are effectively doing is you're putting yourself into jet lag all of the time. And it's very, very hard on your biological clock. So it's really something that I wouldn't recommend. And I always say, if you want to be a proficient sleeper and a productive sleeper, you have to figure out how much sleep you need, and you need to go to bed at the same time every night, including the weekends, because you're going to need the least amount of sleep that is going to leave you the most productive and the most powerful, because your body is going to learn to compress it in a way, and to consolidate it. So there are different ways to figure that out. But that's basically what happens with sleep deficit and repair and consequences of sleep deficit. Okay. Does that make sense? Was that not too complicated?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great example.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Claude, do you have anything else you'd like to ask Christine before we jump into our wrap-up?
Well, I was just, when you're talking about babies and stuff, I'm not a dad that I know of. But when I am, so...
Actually,
okay, so,
Claude, no, I'm just kidding.
So,
are you also a psychic?
No, it's not to do with that. Just when I eventually may become a dad. Okay, so two things that I'm not sure about that I've heard that actually worked very well. I'm not sure if they're healthy though, so I'm hoping you'll clear this up for me and the audience. So the first thing is cough syrup. You probably shouldn't drug your kids with cough syrup to make them sleep better. No. Okay, and the second
Future
one
father
is,
of the year.
the second one is shaking them until they stop crying. Is that a no-no also?
Well, it's kind of different on
God.
the way you shake them and at what angle and at what.
I'm thinking like just full on, just like gorilla shake.
That's
like trying to get a coconut off a tree.
They're gonna sleep for a long time. But no, what happens is that movement and close contact is obviously, are going to help your baby. But what most parents don't really realize very often is that it's not necessarily the jiggling around, but it's actually the parents' pulse and the parents' breathing that is starting to calm babies down. So you very often notice that very calm and zen parents, which we also can call, very often parasympathetic people who tend to stay chill, have calmer babies, and parents who tend to be a little bit more nervous tend to have more agitated babies sometimes as well. And it's really because your baby is literally adapting to your breath, your heartbeat, and to your hormones, really. So really something that you can practice as a new parent, even before having your baby, is to really train yourself on getting your pulse down and to have deep breathing techniques so that when you pick up your baby, you can stay very quiet and your baby will quieten down with you. So what I talk about is, especially when you do sleep training, is that when you go into that room and your baby is angry and tired and can't sleep, they're like a little red bubble, like a red little bubble of angriness. And
sounds like my ex-girlfriends.
I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, let's just continue, right? And you just float in there like a turquoise big bubble sphere. And your job is to take that little red bubble and to adapt it into that turquoise. So to calm it down, and to get it to merge with your sphere, basically. That tends to help a lot of parents to then take their child into their arms and to do deep breathing, and that way it's helping the baby to regulate their stress as well, because they can't do it on their own. They're not ready. So they need a caregiver's help to regulate their stress. And that's how I explain it and how I do it.
Well, thank you for turning my two idiotic questions into something very helpful.
So practice turquoise bubble might work with the ex-girlfriend too. But
well, you know what? I try to be the turquoise bubble, but they're always angry and cranky and tired. So I'm just like, man, what can I do? So I just give them cough syrup, and if that doesn't work, I just shake them until they stop yelling at me. Anyway,
I'm just waiting for the Mounties to come after you, Claude.
I was going to say, like,
I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I think actually that's all. I was just wondering about all that sleep apnea, because I feel like I've got a little bit of that happening with myself, and I don't think I'm overweight, but I did get in a fight when I was younger, and I'm pretty sure my nose got broken a couple ways. So I'm probably going to get it checked out, because it's I do not feel refreshed in the mornings at all.
Then definitely, if you are like, if you don't wake up, if you are like one of those people who really go to sleep and you sleep and you wake up and you're not refreshed, and you get an amount of sleep that is decent, let's say between 6 and 8 hours, then I definitely suggest that you go and get a sleep study done to see what's going on with your breathing, what's going on with your brain frequency, with your heart frequency, and then see what the verdict is, and then go from there.
Yeah, because I usually get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and I fall asleep and I just wake up, whenever my alarm goes off or whenever I naturally wake up. And it's just, it freaks me out, because I sleep more than, I guess, your average person, which I'm trying to be healthy. But
which is fine.
Yeah, but I also don't dream. So do you know if that has anything to do with sleep apnea, or kind of not feeling rested, or is it just kind of different people don't dream for different reasons?
No, everybody dreams. It's just really about what you remember, and it depends on when you wake up. So very often it's, especially our last sleep phase is where we have our longest REM phase, which is where we're dreaming. And if you wake up just after that, and if you had a positive dream, most of the time you'll be able to remember it. But some people, they go out of the REM phase, they have a tiny bit of light sleep, and then they wake up and then they don't remember. So it's very individual. I don't know if it is related to sleep apnea. It could be that if you never get into the real REM phase, that is why you don't remember it. But I can't really say from here. The other thing that I'd really check out that you probably have already is definitely all of your hormones, your different thyroid levels, and see what is going on there. Because, it can be sleep apnea, but very often if our hormone household is not regulated, then it can be a problem too. And then, of course, gut function. If you have a kind of parasite that is draining or that is damaging your gut lining, you're probably not able to absorb all the vitamins or minerals that you are eating, and that way you can also be tired. So a lot of clients, not 90% of the clients that I work with have leaky gut or a dysfunctional mucosal barrier, and so even if they have a very healthy diet, their gut can't absorb it. So they very often have B12 deficiencies, vitamin D deficiencies, and that will leave you with less energy as well, even though you probably have a poster child diet and the like. So that's where lab testing comes in as very handy, because you can actually pinpoint those things, especially if you'd go to the sleep lab and you'd be good, I'm going to get this diagnosed, and then they tell you that everything's fine. Nothing can be more devastated than not knowing what is going on, So a lot of people actually come to me after a sleep lab study because they were kind of hoping that they would be told exactly what to do, and then everything is physically actually fine in the sleep department. Let's put it that way.
That's what happened to me. I did a study, and they're like, "Oh no, you're fine." And it's horrible to sleep with all those wires attached to you. It's like I don't know how they get any good data. Like, I
think they have they round things up, and they know what the margin of error is in terms of, and then calibrate to that. But yes, it's tricky. You would have to be there for a week at least in order to get really good data. But yeah, but then you have to talk to me and we'll figure it out.
Perfect. All right, Brian, I am, my question jar is empty right now. So if you're good to go to the wrap up.
Sure. So Christine, who is the first person that comes to mind, or what is your definition of the optimum human?
I don't think there is such a thing as optimum human. It would put too much pressure on anyone. But I think that it's always a good thing in order to strive towards it. You know, I think everyone has their own vision of it, but I think when you have an idea of what an optimum human is and you strive to go towards it without necessarily wanting to complete that goal, that's a healthy balance, you know, of not beating yourself up and yet having a motivation. So for me, optimum is, or what I strive towards is giving my body and my mind really the respect they deserve. And I don't do that all the time. Like, I'm very far from optimum, but I really try to feed my body foods and vitamins or anything it needs in order to function to its best capabilities. And then I try to give it exercise, and I also try to give my mind some breaks, which I'm very bad at doing, which I really have to work on. But that is, if I manage to reach all of those things together, that's when I'd be very close to what I define optimum human.
All right. Beautiful. And if you had to rescue 3 books from a natural disaster, what books would they be?
They wouldn't be any science books or anything like that. So they would probably be my own journal from my teenage years.
Wow, I actually really love that answer. So the first time that anybody's gone kind of outside the box with that, so I love that.
There you go.
You know what? Yeah, Brian, you used to have a diary when you were a teenage girl too, right?
I did, yes. Yes, I also had some traveling pants.
That's why it resonates. Jesus. I'm surprised you haven't killed me yet, Brian.
Me too.
Like, I know if I get a white powder in the mail, I'm going to know who it's from.
It's because I'm a Zen master. That's why. That's why you are alive.
That's the master.
Brian is imagining the bubble right now.
Right.
Turquoise.
Yeah. So now I'm the red bubble, and he's the turquoise. Okay. All right. Back to books.
Other ones?
Christine?
Yeah. Sorry.
Any other books that you would?
Books. I find it very hard.
It can be videos. It can be any sort of resources that you really feel like that have helped you or keep helping you.
It's a difficult one. I don't really know. There's nothing that I think that I could live without, like right now. So I really go for more practical things. Like, I'd probably take my family's, I don't know, documentation and stuff like that, rather than now a resource. So I have everything in my head that I need.
I mean, a passport could be considered a book, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like, kind of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm not very. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any author that I couldn't live without, I have to say. It's kind of because the books that I read are in my head. I don't need to physically take them.
Right. All right. Perfect. And who would you want to hear on our podcast, and what would you want to ask them or hear them talk about?
Oh, that's such a good question. You already had a hero of mine on the podcast, like JP Sears. That was awesome.
Yeah, JP's awesome.
That was amazing. But who would I like to have on your podcast? The optimum human. Actually, it's a hard one. Could it be like reaching
we
for
asked
the
the tough
stars
questions here.
kind of way, or
It can
could
be
it?
anyone. It can be anyone you want. Alive, dead. We'll try and get a medium in here with a Ouija board. You know,
Can you get Kevin Costner?
Kevin Costner. We might be able to get Kevin Bacon, but maybe Kevin Costner.
No. Oh, you could get Barack Obama. That would be really cool, especially
Barack-
now.
Yes,
Barack Obama.
He's probably a little bit less busy now, so you might have a shot.
Yeah, if I can break him away from the golf course. What would you want
give him
to?
some exercise lessons afterwards, or give him some chiropractor moves afterwards, and it kind of
Absolutely.
make it a bonus.
No, what would you want us to ask him or hear him talk about?
I would like to know about his health, like the truth. Like, what did he do? What didn't he do?
What brand of cigarettes does he smoke?
Yeah, like, no, seriously, what is his, like, the truth? What is his point on that? Did he do anything? Did he have any help? Would he have done anything differently? Yeah, no, I'd love to do that.
Who can bench press more, him or Michelle?
She's got toned arms, that woman. Like,
Yeah, she does.
He aged like 30 years within that 8 years of presidency.
just
you
like
see
any other president. It's such
You
a
know what?
stressful job, I would imagine.
I think it was worse on him. If you look at the before and after, you're just like, oh man, it's like a vampire just stealing his blood. Like,
he probably really cared. That's probably why.
Mhm.
Like, I had a tough time, so.
I could not imagine being an American, let alone an American president.
No.
Right. All right. So if you could give our listeners just like one practical piece of advice on getting better sleep, what would it be, and why did you pick that piece of advice?
So one of the things is that take sleep seriously, but not too seriously. So take it seriously, try your best, but don't freak out about it. Like, don't put yourself under pressure. So going to bed and already saying, I have to sleep, that's going to be very unsexy for sleep, and it's not going to come. So kind of take it seriously, but don't use it as a stress factor, or don't let it become a stress factor.
Don't be neurotic about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, beautiful. Well, Christine, this has been awesome. For our listeners that are interested in getting better or more sleep, how can our listeners find out more about you?
So they can go to my website, sleeplikeaboss.com, and I've also created a 5-day challenge, which they can take, and that's at sleeplikeaboss.com/optimumhuman. And it's pretty nifty because a major side effect of getting enough sleep and, calibrating nutrition for sleep, for example, is weight loss. So if they want to sleep themselves thin, then that's the place to go.
I like that tagline.
Yeah, if you're not already using that, I may steal that.
No, that's mine.
Fair enough.
That's right.
International copyright law. All right, beautiful. Well, Christine, thank you so much. This has been an awesome chat.
Thanks so much for having me.
Do you have anything else that you would like to ask, share for our listeners?
It was delightful. Like, it was really delightful. And if anyone has a question, I love getting mail or email. So you can email me at christine@sleeplikeaboss.com if you want to. And if you have any questions, truly just reach out. It's very easy.
Beautiful. And all that information will be in the show notes. And thank you again. This has been
Thank you for joining
awesome.
us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Optimum Human Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to head on over to iTunes and give a 5-star rating and review, which will help spread the word to more awesome listeners just like you. Head on over to theoptimumhuman.com and subscribe to the free newsletter and get the Optimum Human's Blueprint to the Optimum Life. Download it instantly. Thanks for listening.